because there were not any biblical stories of true Christians celebrating their birthdays.
Every December, millions of Jehovah's Witnesses make the same decision. They don't put up a Christmas tree. They don't exchange gifts on Christmas morning. They don't attend holiday services. To most people, the explanation seems simple. They think Christmas is pagan. But that's only part of the story. The real reason goes much deeper. It involves forgotten history, early Christianity, Roman traditions, and one question that has divided Christians for centuries. Should every tradition about Jesus be accepted simply because it's popular? By the end of this video, you'll see why the debate over Christmas isn't really about December 25th at all, and why understanding that changes the entire conversation. At first, this question seems almost too simple. If Christmas celebrates Jesus' birth, why doesn't the Bible ever tell Christians to celebrate it? Jehovah's Witnesses believe that answer changes everything. When they read the New Testament, they notice something unusual. The Bible carefully records Jesus' birth. It tells the story of Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, and later the visit of the Magi. But after those events, something unexpected happens. The Bible never tells Christians to celebrate Jesus' birthday. Instead, it repeatedly directs attention to another event, his death. On the night before he died, Jesus told his followers to continue observing a memorial of his death. Jehovah's Witnesses point to this as the only annual observance Jesus specifically instructed his disciples to keep. To them, that isn't a small detail. It's the foundation of their decision. They often ask a simple question. If celebrating Jesus' birth was meant to be part of Christian worship, why didn't Jesus command it? And why didn't the apostles ever organize such a celebration? Many other Christians answer differently. They argue that celebrating Christ's birth is a meaningful way to honor him, even if the Bible doesn't specifically command it. In their view, not every Christian practice requires an explicit instruction, provided it doesn't contradict Scripture. So now the discussion becomes much bigger than Christmas. It becomes a question about how Christians decide what belongs in worship. Should believers practice only what the Bible directly commands, or can traditions develop over time if they help people remember Christ? That single question has divided Christians for centuries. And it leads directly to another mystery. Because if the Bible never gives a date for Jesus' birth, why does almost the entire Christian world celebrate it on December 25th? For many people, December 25th feels inseparable from Christmas. It's the date printed on calendars, celebrated around the world, and recognized by billions. But here's the surprising part. The Bible never gives a date for Jesus' birth. Not a month, not a season, not even a hint that early Christians celebrated it every year. So where did December 25th come from? Historians generally agree that the earliest Christians did not focus on celebrating Jesus' birth. For the first few centuries, the emphasis was placed on his life, teachings, death, and resurrection. The idea of an annual Christmas celebration developed later as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire. During that same period, late December was already a time of celebration in Rome. Festivals such as Saturnalia filled the streets with feasts, gift-giving, and public celebrations. Around the same time, December 25th also became associated with Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a festival honoring the rebirth of light after the darkest days of winter. This is where the discussion becomes more complex. Many historians believe these existing winter celebrations influenced the eventual choice of December 25th as the date to celebrate Jesus' birth. Others argue the date may also have developed from early Christian calculations about the timing of Jesus' conception and death. While scholars continue to debate exactly how these influences interacted, there is broad agreement that the New Testament itself does not establish December 25th as Jesus' birthday. Jehovah's Witnesses point to this history as one reason they do not celebrate Christmas. They argue that if the date and many surrounding customs developed after the time of the apostles, then Christians should be cautious about treating them as part of true worship. But if the date isn't biblical, what about the traditions themselves? Because the Christmas tree, Santa Claus, mistletoe, and even gift-giving each have stories of their own, and some are far older than Christmas itself. If December 25th wasn't established in the Bible, another question naturally follows. What about the traditions that define Christmas today? The decorated tree, Santa Claus, mistletoe, Christmas stockings, gift exchanges. Most people assume these traditions have always been part of the Christmas story, but history paints a much more complicated picture. Take the Christmas tree. Evergreen trees had long been used in various parts of Europe during winter festivals as symbols of life during the coldest months of the year. Centuries later, decorated trees became associated with Christmas, especially in Germany, before spreading across Europe and eventually the rest of the world. Then there's Santa Claus. The familiar image of a cheerful man in a red suit didn't appear overnight. It developed over hundreds of years, drawing inspiration from Saint Nicholas, local European folklore, literature, artwork, and later popular advertising. The Santa recognized today is the result of centuries of cultural change rather than a figure found in the Bible. Even traditions like mistletoe, holly, Yule logs, and festive wreaths each have their own histories. Some have roots in older European winter customs. Others were adopted much later as Christmas celebrations evolved. Historians don't always agree on the exact influence of every tradition, but they broadly agree that many familiar Christmas customs developed gradually over time, rather than originating with the earliest Christians. This is exactly where Jehovah's Witnesses draw a line. They believe that if a religious celebration becomes mixed with traditions that developed outside the practices of the first-century Christian congregation, then sincere Christians should avoid it altogether. To them, it's not about judging people who celebrate Christmas. It's about worshiping God in a way they believe closely follows the example of the earliest Christians. But then another question appears. If history explains the holiday, why do Jehovah's Witnesses also refuse to celebrate birthdays? At first, the two seem completely unrelated, but according to their reasoning, they're connected in a surprising way. At first, Christmas and birthdays seem like two completely different celebrations. One marks the birth of Jesus, the other celebrates the birth of an individual. So why do Jehovah's Witnesses reject both? Their reasoning begins with an observation they believe many people overlook. The Bible never records God's servants celebrating birthdays. In fact, the only two birthday celebrations specifically described in the Bible involve rulers, not faithful worshipers. In one account, an Egyptian pharaoh celebrates his birthday, and during the celebration, one of his servants is executed. In another, King Herod holds a birthday feast that leads to the execution of John the Baptist. Jehovah's Witnesses do not teach that these passages explicitly ban birthday celebrations. Instead, they argue that the Bible's silence about faithful servants celebrating birthdays, combined with the only recorded examples ending in tragedy, suggests that birthdays were not part of true Christian worship. To many Christians, however, those passages simply describe historical events. They point out that the Bible also records many actions without approving or condemning them. From their perspective, the absence of birthday celebrations in Scripture does not automatically make them wrong. This difference highlights something much bigger. It isn't really about birthdays, and it isn't only about Christmas. It's about how the Bible should be interpreted. Should Christians avoid practices that are not explicitly commanded in Scripture? Or is there room for traditions that are not forbidden, provided they honor God? That single question shapes almost every major belief Jehovah's Witnesses hold, not just holidays. And it also explains why refusing Christmas isn't simply a once-a-year decision. For Jehovah's Witnesses, it's part of a much larger way of life. And that's where the story becomes deeply personal. Because what does refusing Christmas actually look like for the people who live it every year? It's one thing to talk about history. It's another to live by those beliefs. For Jehovah's Witnesses, refusing Christmas isn't a decision made once every December. It's something they prepare for all year because they know the season will bring questions, invitations, and sometimes difficult choices. Imagine being a child at school in December. The classroom is decorated with lights and Christmas trees. Friends are exchanging gifts. Christmas songs are playing. The class is preparing for a holiday party. Then the teacher asks why one student isn't participating. For many Jehovah's Witness children, that conversation happens almost every year. Witness parents often explain to their children that they aren't missing out. They're making a choice to worship God according to their understanding of the Bible. Rather than focusing on one holiday, many Witness families say they enjoy giving gifts, spending time together, and showing kindness throughout the year instead of limiting those expressions to a single season. But not everyone experiences it the same way. Some current witnesses describe refusing Christmas as a meaningful reminder that their loyalty belongs to God before tradition. Former members, however, have shared very different experiences. Some remember feeling isolated at school, left out of family celebrations, or struggling when relatives celebrated holidays they could not join. Others describe the season as emotionally difficult because it highlighted differences between them and friends or extended family. These contrasting experiences reveal something important. The discussion is no longer just about history or theology, it's about identity. Because refusing Christmas isn't simply saying no to a holiday, it's saying yes to a particular understanding of Christian worship. And that leads to an even bigger question. If the Bible is the authority for all Christians, why do sincere Christians studying the same scriptures reach completely different conclusions about Christmas? By now, one thing has become clear. The debate over Christmas isn't really about a tree, or gifts, or even December 25th. It's about how the Bible should be understood. Here's the fascinating part. Nearly every Christian group reads the same New Testament. They all read about Jesus. They all read about the apostles. They all claim the Bible is their authority. Yet they don't all arrive at the same conclusion. So why? Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Christian worship should include only practices they see as supported by Scripture. If a religious celebration cannot be traced back to Jesus or the first-century Christian congregation, they believe it should not become part of worship. Many other Christians take a different approach. They agree that the Bible is the highest authority, but they also believe that traditions can develop over time if they help believers honor Christ and do not clearly contradict biblical teaching. From that perspective, celebrating Christmas is viewed as a voluntary expression of faith rather than a command. This difference reflects two very different ways of answering the same question. One asks, where does the Bible command this? The other asks, where does the Bible forbid this? That may seem like a small distinction, but it shapes far more than Christmas. It influences views on birthdays, holidays, religious symbols, worship practices, and even how churches organize themselves. For Jehovah's Witnesses, refusing Christmas is one example of a much broader commitment to what they believe is first-century Christianity. Other Christian traditions believe that faithful worship can include customs that developed later, provided they remain centered on Christ. So the disagreement isn't simply about one holiday, it's about who has the authority to define authentic Christianity. And once that question enters the picture, the story moves beyond Christmas entirely, because the next layer reveals why this single holiday has become one of the clearest symbols of Jehovah's Witness identity. By this point, it's clear that Christmas isn't just another holiday for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's become something much bigger. For many witnesses, refusing Christmas is a visible expression of who they are and what they believe. Think about it. Most religious beliefs happen quietly. They're practiced inside churches, homes, or through personal prayer. But Christmas is different. Every December, it's impossible to ignore. Decorations appear in neighborhoods, music fills shopping centers, schools hold concerts, offices organize holiday parties, family invitations begin arriving. Choosing not to participate means making your beliefs visible to everyone around you. That's why many Jehovah's Witnesses don't see refusing Christmas as losing something. They see it as standing apart from traditions they believe were never part of first-century Christianity. In their view, remaining separate from customs they consider unbiblical is an important expression of loyalty to God. At the same time, that choice can carry real consequences. Some people admire their consistency, others struggle to understand it. Family members may disagree, friends may assume Jehovah's Witnesses dislike holidays altogether, even though many witness families celebrate anniversaries, weddings, graduations, and enjoy giving gifts at other times during the year. Former members often describe this season differently. Some say declining Christmas celebrations strengthened their sense of belonging while they were inside the religion, but became one of the most emotional reminders of separation after they left. Others remember the challenge of rebuilding family traditions later in life. Whether viewed as an act of faith or a difficult sacrifice, one thing is hard to deny. Christmas has become more than a date on the calendar. It has become a symbol of identity. But identity raises one final question. If millions of sincere Christians all believe they're following the Bible, how can they arrive at such different conclusions, and who decides which interpretation is closest to the teachings of Jesus? At first, this video seemed to be about one holiday. Why don't Jehovah's Witnesses celebrate Christmas? But by now, you've probably noticed something. Christmas was never the real story. The real story is authority. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that true Christianity should be measured against the beliefs and practices of the first-century Christian congregation. Their approach asks one central question before accepting any religious custom. Can this practice be clearly supported by the Bible? If the answer is no, or if they believe the practice developed later through human tradition, they choose to avoid it. Many other Christian churches approach the question differently. They see Christmas as a celebration centered on Jesus Christ. While acknowledging that many traditions developed over centuries and that December 25th is not identified in Scripture, they believe the holiday can still honor Christ when its focus remains on Christian faith. For them, historical development does not automatically make a tradition incompatible with Christian faith. Two groups, the same Bible, the same Jesus, yet two very different conclusions. Perhaps that's why this conversation has lasted for generations. Because beneath every discussion about Christmas lies an even deeper question. Should Christian faith be shaped only by what Scripture explicitly teaches, or can traditions developed by believers also have a place? Whatever answers someone reaches, one thing is certain. The decision to celebrate or not celebrate Christmas is rarely just about a single day each year. It's about how a person understands history, how they read the Bible, and ultimately, who they believe has the authority to define true Christian worship. And maybe that's why the real debate never begins on December 25th. It begins the moment someone asks a simple question: how do I know what God actually wants?